It's 7:54 a.m. on February 22nd, 2018. Nameless employee at a company called DFIN logs into their laptop in his Chicago apartment. He doesn't know it yet, but he's triggered a chain of events that'll allow a team of Russian hackers to steal $100 million from Wall Street investors and walk free. This team has been targeting him directly for months, and they finally succeeded at installing a PowerShell backdoor on his computer. At the end of the video, you're gonna know exactly what that means. Fast forward a few months, the morning of November 6th, 2019. He opens his workstation, and sitting in his queue is Roku's confidential Q3 earnings report. And his job is to clean it up before it goes live with the SEC. Bad news for Roku that quarter. Thanks to that backdoor, the hackers now have access to this report. And as soon as they get it, they read it, they figure out what's about to happen, and they short the stock. That evening, in the earnings call, Roku's disappointing performance goes public. The stock crashes, of course. The hackers close their position and cash in. This is how Russia hacked Wall Street and got away with it. Now, real-life hacking is not at all like Hollywood hacking. I actually learned that one from Pax, which is this vigilante hacker who took down North Korea's entire internet for a week as revenge because they tried to hack him. He actually mapped how he did it when we met him for this video, so we framed that and we keep it here at the office.
I mean, it's like, check that file that James Willie dude sent you. Scroll down right fucking there, right where he said was like, he just inserted like a very basic like PowerShell backdoor.
Now, the way Pax was attacked was not too different from our nameless employee. That's with a PowerShell backdoor. Now, PowerShell is a shell program. It's been part of Windows since around 2006, and it helps company system administrators automate tasks or manage all the company's computers remotely. If you're not a geek, you've probably never heard of it, and that's kind of fine, but PowerShell has become really popular with attackers lately, so much so that a free open source command and control kit called PowerShell Empire was built around it. Empire works by creating these agents that run on a victim's computer and periodically send data to a remote server. So let's go back to our nameless employee. He works for DFIN, which doesn't stand for Dunder Mifflin, but Donnelly Financial Solutions, a company out of Chicago that, among other things, lets you file your paperwork with the SEC. But we can still keep Dwight for the story. And when a company decides to go public, it basically commits to this lifetime subscription to the SEC to send their favorite materials, their favorite reading materials, which are filings. You have your 10Ks for annual, your 10Qs for quarterly, your 8Ks for shit moments. You have your proxy statements before shareholder meetings. And each one of these needs to be in this format called EGGER, which you Americans love your acronyms. It means something. The companies like DFIN have this software platform that helps the filers deal with all the bureaucracy and make sure that it's EGGER formatted. Now, Dwight and the rest of the DFIN team often have to see these reports before they go live to make sure that they followed the right bureaucracy format. Now, it's believed that at some point around February 2018, Dwight probably opened a compromised email or maybe a macro in a Word document that started this whole thing. Now, inside that document was a PowerShell Empire stager, a tiny piece of code, maybe 100 to 200 bytes. Now, it can't do much to compromise the system on its own, but what it can do is launch PowerShell and hide the fact that PowerShell is running on this computer, and then use PowerShell to connect to a domain and download the rest of the files that it needs to do the real damage. That domain is called a command and control domain. And the files get downloaded to the computer, but they stay in the RAM, in the computer's memory. They don't go to the hard drive or to the SSD. Now, this is called the agent. Now, the fact that the agent lives in the RAM, in the computer's memory, and not in the computer's storage, like your hard drive or your SSD, makes it really hard to detect for your good old antivirus.
My name is John McAfee. I'm the founder of the McAfee Antivirus Software Company. How do I uninstall this software? I have no idea.
Now, the agent's task is very simple. It's going to create a secure connection with that domain, the C2 domain, and every few minutes, it's just going to send useful stuff that it finds, like Dwight's keystrokes. Now, if you add another tool to that, like Mimikatz, it can also start sending, for example, login credentials. Now, RAM, the computer's memory, is wiped every time the computer shuts down, and then the agent disappears. And a hacker might just choose to run this and just get what they need and leave practically no trace that they were ever in the computer. But if you went undetected, or maybe you're based in a country that would never extradite you to the States, then why leave? Well, you might choose to ensure that there's persistence, this is what it's called, which means that the stager has a place where it can run again, maybe when the computer starts, or maybe with some folder shortcut that triggers it. And every time the agent runs again, And the story continues. Now, we know that this happened to Dwight's laptop because almost 2 years later, the computer was still accessing that domain with all this new information. Now, the agent wasn't reading or sending files or SEC reports. It was just getting login information to the hackers and pushing it to ththose domains. CloudAPIFinance.info is one of the actual domains that they used. Also appfinreport.info and scoreyourmoney.com, which all sounds super shady now, but for somebody who's looking at logs, it might be something that they would ignore. And get this, these are all expired and available for purchase. And I don't know if somebody might be daring enough to go and buy them again because they're kind of like a piece of history. Now, I did look at their domain authority, and none of them have anything going for them. But if you're looking for a domain authority that's more than 0, you should look at Ahrefs. I've been using Ahrefs truly for over 10 years to build our company's SEO presence. And today we have about 4,000 websites that have linked to our domain over 49,000 times, and that's what lets us outrank many of our competitors. Now, we use Ahrefs to monitor what they're publishing, to identify keywords that they're trying to snatch from us, and to find keyword ideas for new content. One of my favorite features is this content gap, which lets us see which keywords we're competing in, which keywords our competitor is targeting that we're not. They also recently launched Ahrefs Web Analytics. If you've been to Google Analytics lately, you know that it's an utter mess to use, and Ahrefs lets you get traffic reports across countries and devices without any of this hassle. It's privacy friendly, requires no cookies and no personal data, and it's real time. No more waiting till the end of the day to get those reports. Now, you can set it up in seconds, and it's free. You can just get it using the link in the description or snapping this QR code here. Truly, Ahrefs is my golden standard for what an SEO tool should be doing, and thank you guys for sponsoring today's video. Now, back to Dwight's laptop. This agent that lives inside isn't stealing data from him. All it really needed was the login information. With Dwight's password, the Russian hackers can now access the company's main portal. This is where they store all their customers' data, and then download anything that they want to this server without raising too many flags. Now, it'd be very easy to suspect a Russian IP address trying to access the company portal regularly. So instead, the hackers used proxies to hide who they were. First, a bit-launched virtual private server that was located in the US, and then a small niche commercial VPN called AirVPN, headquartered in Italy, but with servers all over the world. This is a mistake that would absolutely bite them in the ass. And now, with this setup in place, making money on Wall Street is easy. You have this crystal ball, access to the company's insider information before it's public. And so the hackers would trade in the stock market like you normally would, except, well, knowing the future. And every time their malware stole a new draft earnings release, they placed the corresponding trade. Now, for example, on July 16th, 2019, they got access to a report that Skechers had some great Q2 performance. And we know that because the police found a text from one of the hackers that said, "We buy SKX today." Now, on July 18th, they bought 130,000 shares before market close. As the earnings call came, Skechers, as expected, spiked 15% from $34 a share to $39 a share, and then they closed the position. In about 2 years, the gang had 10x'd their money from $9 million to $90 million. And they were executing these trades from around 20 different brokerage accounts, and 2 of those accounts started getting flags because nobody is that successful in the stock market. A bank in Cyprus and a bank in Denmark called Saxo Bank.
They're so successful, they begin to raise suspicions at Saxo Bank.
He assured us that they are not using any kind of insider information. They only use what is available in public sources.
And we finally have a name. Vladislav Klushin. And when the bank reached out to him about this, he told them that his success came from this AI trading platform that they had built called Preston that was scraping social media chatter and using that to predict stocks. What neither of them knew at the time was that the FBI was also on this. Now, even though they were using a Danish bank and CFDs instead of buying stock directly, the SEC had caught on to their success. It was hundreds of trades, minutes before the earnings call, and they correctly predicted the stock movement. So the SEC notified the FBI.
The SEC reported that all of the targeted companies had one thing in common. They used the same filing agents.
Before this case started, I didn't know what a filing agent was. I've been in this business for a long time. I've worked in securities fraud, and I didn't know that there was an entire industry of companies that assist publicly traded companies to file their required reports with the SEC. But they do exist, there's a number of them, and what was unique here was that all of these different companies in all these different sectors were using 2 of these filing agents.
Every goddamn time I've talked to any FBI agent, I'm like, wow, you are the one protecting our nation. You are an absolute idiot.
Now, with this clue on the filing agencies, they identified Top and Merrill and DFIN as the filing agents for 95% of all these crystal ball trades. And that's who they went to next. Now, the security teams at these companies found 5 compromised employee logins in Top and Merrill and 3 in DFIN. With some computer forensics, they were able to find some of the signals that a PowerShell Empire backdoor had been running. For example, here, you can see that PowerShell was renamed to RDTEVC just to hide the fact that PowerShell was running from the system's own security. Now, because the PowerShell stager needs to call out to one of these domains, the domain info is stored in the file, so you can find it if you know what you're looking for. But when they went to the domain register, they discovered that the domains that these agents were linking to, they had just been purchased with Bitcoin. Now, domains do require you to include the whois information, but the stuff that they included was fake. They did find, though, that the domains that were used for the different stagers had some traits in common, like the same fake names. Still, this was all a dead end for now. The next step was to subpoena the brokers, including the Denmark broker Saxo Bank. Now remember, Saxo Bank had already flagged this AI trader story, and they knew Vladislav Klushin's name, but the challenge now is how do we link him to the hack? The trades that Klushin had been executing had all been done in the bank's trading platform, Saxo Trader Go. And logins to this account, they all came from one protected address, this address. And this IP address belonged to a commercial VPN provider, AirVPN. Now, why would you use a VPN to trade when the trading platform knows who you are anyway? I mean, getting info from a VPN is not easy, and they could probably use this to hide their location. But AirVPN was a relatively small company with not as many servers as their larger competitors. And most of Klushin's logins to the account had gone through that IP address, which is called an exit IP address. And that's only shared by a few hundred of AirVPN's clients. Now, armed with a court order, the FBI went to DataPath, which is the US hosting company that actually owned this server. Now, this is called a pen register or a trap and trace order, which allows them to see traffic that's going through the server, but not to see what the traffic contains, because that would actually require a wiretap, which is a much more complicated authorization to get. Now, in early 2020, they got permission to monitor all live upstream IPs to that server for about a month between January and February. And then finally, this Russian IP address kept coming up, which also matched the exact time at which the brokerage accounts were used. And this is the case breakthrough, which gives us the smoking gun. The static upstream IP address that was connecting to AirVPN to log into the Saxo account and execute the trades on Vladislav Klushin's accounts belonged to M13, a cybersecurity company based out of Russia.
There's a particular discipline in security, cybersecurity, it's called offensive security. That's a silly name because it's like offensive defense.
Now, many hackers run cybersecurity companies because that's usually what pays the bills. It's a good cover, while they use their spare time to hack either for fun, for revenge, or to become millionaires.
I don't call myself a security researcher. I'm a hacker. Maybe I watched the movie Hackers when I was too young or something.
I feel like God.
Now, the company's records show Vladislav Klushin as director, and Nikolai Rumentsev and Ivan Ermakov were all deputy directors in the company, along with 2 more suspects tied to the company. Now, Ermakov had also been linked to election interference. He hacked the DNC back in 2016. But more crucially, with a combination of names and a set of IP addresses registered to this M13 company, they were able to link everything else. Now, M13's, the company's static IP addresses, could be tied to buying the C2 domains, to the Bitcoin address that paid for them, and for the BitLaunch servers. And they even confirmed that Ermakov had used these IP addresses to log to his iTunes account from the exact same office. Now remember, the FBI couldn't see what data was being transmitted, but they were able to prove that at the exact same time there was a connection from M13 to the VPN, there was a connection to DFIN's portal to extract the data using Dwight's credentials. The real Dwight in this story, by the way, is called Julie Soma, whose password was used to download thousands of documents from the company's servers. We have evidence enough to jail these guys. We have them dead to rights, but they're in Russia. Yermakov knows that he's been indicted for the DNC hack, so he accepts his fate that he will never be able to travel to any country that could potentially extradite him to the US. But Klushin had no idea they were onto him. The FBI was also smart enough to let them continue with this scheme to avoid raising any suspicion. And lo and behold, he makes the mistake that would mean his doom, at least for a while. He wanted to see the world, and he wanted to go skiing in the Alps.
He was about to go skiing, and the Swiss agents were waiting for him. They swooped in, they arrested him, and minutes after they arrested him, his wife sent a text message. The text message that she sent was to his co-conspirator, Mr. Ermakov. She sees handcuffs being placed on her husband, and the first person she reaches out to is the former Russian military intelligence officer that we've identified as the actual hacker.
Extradited, trialed, found guilty, sentenced to 9 years in prison, and I wish this story was over, but it isn't, because on August 1st, 2024, he was set free and put on a plane back to Moscow. This was part of a prisoner swap where Klushin and 7 other convicted criminals were sent back to Russia in exchange for 24 prisoners that were sent back to the US. It is believed that this is the first ever cyber criminal prisoner swap in history, and this is really the darkest part of the story. Bargaining a prisoner swap deal requires some good enough government connections. Like, we know that M13 used to work for the government. We know that there was a group of investors that also got tips from the information that M13 was extracting. We have Ivan Ermakov indicted for much more political attacks. He's in the FBI's most wanted list. Just he wasn't dumb enough to leave Russia, I guess.
The Russians do operate freely inside the Western financial system as an operatives, and they have assets.
You're saying Russian spies in the United States have been stealing financial information from American companies for years and profiting from it?
Sure, they do. Not Russian spies are profiting from it, but the people to whom they've been delivering this information. Bosses back in Moscow or companies which are affiliated with the Kremlin and Kremlin operations.
Now, if you enjoyed this story, you should watch our episode with Pax, with all the details on how he took down Kim Jong-un's internet and lived to tell the tale. Catch you on the next one.